Hello everyone, welcome to Skilled Dev. Trey here, and in this lesson, we are going to solve Fix This. A very common interview question that occurs frequently is one where you're given some code that someone else has written, and you're told to either debug it, or refactor it, or do both. So what I want to do in this lesson is work through one of those questions and show you how I would handle it in an interview. There aren't really any new concepts being presented in this lesson. It's mostly going to build off JavaScript fundamentals that we've learned in other lessons. The focus is really going to be on understanding this unknown code and managing it effectively. So the prompt states you found some code on Stack Overflow, and then you copy and pasted this code into your application. However, this code is broken. So now it's our job to fix it. So we have a user class and a meeting class. With the user class, you can get the person's name, and you can print their seat number in the meeting. The meeting itself takes a user's array of objects in its constructor. It assigns the presenter to the first person in the user's array. We also want to be able to get the presenter's name from the meeting, so it assigns the getName function from the user to the getPresenterName function in the meeting. And finally, we have a setUserSeats function that iterates through all the users and assigns them a seat in the meeting. Then, when we call printSeatNumber in the user class, it should print this seat number. So some things to note is that specifically, the meeting class itself is broken, so we should only make changes to this class. We should not change user at all. We're able to debug this using any tools or methods that we want. The only restriction is that we should just keep our changes to a minimum. So if we created a users array with these three users and then a meeting, we'll get the following results. When we get the presenter name, it's returning undefined instead of the first user, which is Jenny above. Then, when we go to print seat number, it's returning 3 every time instead of what we expected of 0, 1, 2. Let's debug this code. We have the same broken code from the lesson and the exact same example that wasn't working. Let's run it just to prove it to ourselves. So the presenter is currently showing as undefined, but it should be Jenny. And then we're getting the seat 3 for each of our users, but they should actually be 0, 1, 2. So we have a bug in the getPresenterName function, and then we're also incorrectly printing the seat numbers when we set them from setUserSeats. So let's first figure out what the issue is with getPresenterName. We are creating the getPresenterName function by passing it the getName function from our user. So each user is going to have a getName function, and we're just taking the first user, or the one at the 0 index, and assigning it to a method inside meeting. So what we're expecting is that users of the 0 should match new user Jenny, or the Jenny user object. So the first thing I would do is just console log presenter and see if that's what we're expecting. So we see that this is correct. We're getting the presenter from the first user. So now let's move on to the getName function. It's actually pretty simple. We're just returning this .name. So the only thing we can really test here is the value of this. So now we run that, and this might be a surprising result. GetName, this is actually referring to the meeting object. We expect it to be referring to the user that we passed in. So for some reason, this context didn't get transferred. We know in JavaScript the this refers to where the method is called and not where it's originally created. So since we're calling getName inside meeting, the this now refers to meeting. So we need a way to make sure that the this context stays bound to the user object. Since we know presenter is correctly identifying the user, we can actually just bind presenter. So now this will always refer to the presenter here. Bind is a method that allows you to store the this context inside of a function. So we run that, and this time it worked. The getName function now has its this value pointing to Jenny. We see that the presenter is Jenny. So now we fixed one bug in the getPresenterName function. Let's clear our debug statements. So now let's quickly discuss what the issue was and how we fixed it. With JavaScript, the context of this is set based on where the function is called and not where it's defined. Not only is understanding the this context essential to JavaScript, but it's also a very common interview question. This is something you should have mastered and know very well before going in. We fixed it by using the bind function, and what bind does is that it allows you to bind the this context to an object. So we passed it the user object that we wanted to take the value of this. So now this refers to the Jenny object. In addition to bind, there's also the functions call and apply that are commonly tested in interviews. In addition to bind, call, and apply, ES6 also introduced arrow functions, which is another common way to handle issues with this context. Now let's debug the issue in the setUserSeats function. We see that we're getting the number 3 every time. Not only is it weird that each user is getting the exact same number, but 3 is also larger than the length of the array. It should only be 0, 1, 2. So in the setUserSeats method, we're looping through our users, and then for each user, we're setting the printSeatNumber function to a method that just logs the index. So when we're logging the index, the value of I is not what we expect it to be in the loop. Let's first just log I as a sanity check. So we see in the loop, I is correctly logging 0, 1, 2. So we can see what's happening is that when it goes I++ and reaches 3 and the loop breaks, I is still being saved to this value and stored in this function. This immediately triggers me to remember that JavaScript is function scoped. So when we declare a variable with var up here, it's forming a closure in the printSeatNumber and then remembering this value of I. So it's not storing it for every iteration, it's storing the outer value of it. So what we need to do is make sure it's stored inside this function itself. So we need to create a new scope for the variable. There are actually 2 good ways to do this. The first and very simple way is switching the var to a let. Var is function scoped, but if we declare a variable with let or const, it's block scoped. So we make that change, and now it worked. That's because each loop, we're creating a new I instead of having the same I in the outer scope. If this were var, this is the equivalent of actually declaring var up here, and then just saying I equals 0. So it's hoisted to the top of the function. This means each loop, it's not creating a new value for I inside the block. It's just replacing this value of I that was hoisted up and declared in the function scope. Another way to solve this that uses some more intermediate and advanced JavaScript is to use an immediately invoked function expression around this declaration. Since var is function scoped, we can create a new function around this and then pass that variable in. So let's see that now. So what we've done is create an immediately invoked function expression that forms a closure. So we pass an I to this function and execute it immediately. This I then becomes the seat number, and we return this function. So now print seat number is equal to this function, and it created a new seat number variable that we passed in as I, and since it's function scoped, it just accesses the value of I in the loop, which is going to be the seat number each time. We run that, and this also works. The solution using let is very simple and shows you understand the difference between block and function scope, and the different variable declarations associated with each. And this solution shows you understand immediately invoked function expressions and have a very strong knowledge of how closures work in JavaScript. So now we've successfully debugged the code and utilized some core JavaScript fundamentals. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you in the next lesson.